the painting of the Battle of Mactan, an obra maestra of no less than her husband, Mr. Elmer Burloman, a renowned figurative expressionist contemporary Filipino artist.
Ang reproduction rate o bilis ng pagkalat ng COVID sa nakalipas na mga araw. Ang reproduction rate na ito muling naitala Hulyo noong nakaraang taon, panahong mas marami pang ipinatutupad na restrictions. Pero sabi ng Okta, mas mabilis daw ang pagkalat ng sakit ngayon kumpara sa surge noong July hanggang August. Posible raw na dahil ito sa mga bagong SARS-CoV-2 variants. Kung patuloy raw na ganito ang mga numero, posibleng umabot sa 3,000 per day ang may tatalang COVID-19 cases sa Metro Manila sa katapusan ng Marso. Nasa early stage pa naman daw ng pagdami ng mga bagong kaso at pwede pang mapigilan. Inirekomenda nila ang pagpapatupad ng mas mahigpit na localized lockdown at border controls. Ginagalang daw ng Interagency Task Force ang desisyon ng mga alkalde ng Metro Manila na ipagpaliban muna ang muling pagbubukas ng non-essential establishments tulad ng mga sinihan at arcade. Sabi ni IATF Vice Chairman Secretary Carlo Nograles, mas alam naman daw ng mga alkalde ang sitwasyon sa kanilang mga nasasakupan. Sinabi rin ni Nograles na tinututukan nila ang pagtaas ng COVID cases sa Metro Manila tulad sa Pasay City. Kailangan daw gawing mas agresibo ang genome sequencing lalo na sa Metro Manila para ma-detect ang mga South Africa at UK variant na sinasabing mas mabilis na makahawa. Kabilang daw ang mga yan sa mga pagbabasihan ng IATF na magiging rekomendasyon nila para sa quarantine classification ng Metro Manila pagdating ng Abril. Yan ang mainit na balita sa oras na ito. Ako po si JP Soriano, buong puso para sa Pilipino.
I wanted to make a piece based on the arrival of Ferdinand Magellan when he tried to conquer the land of Lapu-Lapu. The size is 8 feet by 16 feet. It's on canvas. Now you can see the piece. It's already underpainted with light gray. And I'm thinking of using acrylic. It will be a one-year traveling show, and it will go to the regional museums of the National Museum in Ilocos, in Iloilo, and Zamboanga. I hope by then I can already travel, to give talks and give workshops to local artists. I'm so glad that Jigo Alampay, the canvas in the National Museum, gave me the freedom to choose the theme that I wanted to depict. My next phase is yung brown washes para ma-define yung mga figures and to position the light and shadow of the whole composition. Welcome to the Pasilio Press Print Studio. This is where I work right now. It's newly built but it's not yet done. Kulang pa yung mga electric fans but it's working. Come in. This is now the development of the work. I'm still continuing doing the washes. It's nice to work on this scale. Because the movement of the arm is much flexible. For this stage, it's not so detailed. Anyway, this is just a guide. I will still cover it with colors. When I do the brown sketches, I highlight the expressions of the faces more. It's fun, to work on this scale. Because the figures look life-size.
I am in awe, Mr. Burlongan. Just the brown wash, it's already like the epic story is already alive.
This is my breakfast for today, cornflakes with almond chocolate milk because I need energy. Every day I feel like I'm off to do battle with my own canvas. This is relevant to what's happening right now because Lapu-Lapu was the first one to resist foreign rule, and that is what is happening to our West Philippine Sea, with China. And no one can take our own land from us. This is for our people and our future generation. And this is my way of capturing the struggles of our forefathers. Physically, it's tiring because I'm not that young anymore compared when I was painting murals in my 20s, where I would finish large-scale murals in a few days. But now I'm just taking my time, enjoying every brush stroke, enjoying the process. This project is really so satisfying, and it's really a dream come true. Magkaiba kami ni Botong. We do the opposite. Kasi si Botong, ginagawa niya yung background first and then the figures last. Ako naman, the other way around. I do the figures first and then the background last. Magellan told these two men to burn their village because he thought that by doing that, they would retreat.
They would go and save the
But
village.
he became more angry.
Of course. That's what we...
But there's a boat leaving.
Yeah. So only 8 loyal men stayed with Magellan,
And the others fled
and the
already.
others fled. No, they had to retreat because they were losing. Imagine, 49 men of Magellan against 1,500.
1,500.
Yeah, but they were surprised. Even Pigafetta, they thought in one village there's only like 300 people. But how come there's 1,500? So that means all the allies of Lapu-Lapu
Came together.
Came together. So I think they were expecting the war. No?
And the Spanish were arrogant because so often, due to their better weapons, they won against huge amounts of indigenous. So
Yes.
they had so many positive experiences. We are stronger than
Yes,
them. So
that's-
they got arrogant.
That's correct, yeah. And that was Magellan was expecting. But then, they didn't know that it was low tide, so the ship couldn't go ashore, couldn't come to the shore.
So they couldn't rescue them with the cannons.
Yes, the cannonballs couldn't reach the shore. So they have
That
to...
is bad planning on the side of a seaman.
They don't have things like Google, you know.
Marine of the tide is something people should do.
You think? You think they were that familiar with things on the east side of the
They
world?
weren't expecting.
You know, they're coming from another part of the world.
And it's never been circumnavigated. So this is the first time you actually see a sea like this.
Yeah, they didn't know the terrain. So
That there's low tide.
that was really Magellan was so overconfident, and their enemies, died instantly, because according to their chronicles, their arrowheads, they were
Dipped in poison.
lethal poison from barks of the tree. It's called the kamandag.
It's Sunday, September 5, and around 5 p.m., Mr. Berlongan told me that he had the chills, that he was feeling a little bit feverish, and I went to feel his neck, and it was a bit warm. So I used the thermometer, and the reading was 38.3. So after he had dinner, he took a tablet of Tempra. We put a sweater on him and some socks because he was having the chills. And it got me a little worried because everything these days seems COVID related. People say when you have a fever, it might be COVID. But I just figured he had a difficult week this week, painting his mural. So I told him to just rest. And around 4 hours later, his fever dropped to 37.1. And that gave me a bit of relief. But I asked him to take a tablet of Tempra anyway and to just rest and have a good night's sleep.
Manila has gone into lockdown again. For 2 weeks, only essential businesses will be allowed to open. A curfew begins at 8 p.m. Those who are not permitted to work can get limited financial help from the state. Now we're in quarantine again. There are less passengers. Only a few people are allowed out. There are 158 tricycle drivers here. How are we going to earn a living? This is our only livelihood, so now we have no source of income at all. I'm worried. The lockdown comes in response to a huge surge in infections, blamed mostly on the Delta variant of the virus. Financial problems and the possibility of contracting COVID-19 are the main concerns. But Manila residents are also worried about being stuck at home for 2 weeks. After rumors that the unvaccinated would be barred from leaving their homes or going to work, thousands rushed to vaccination centers as the lockdown began.
Ilusyon mo sa harap. Angat ha. Angat dito.
Hindi na sir, kumakama ka dun sa one.
Nakakalso na rin sa dyan, Grace.
Opo sir. Ang napagalawa, sa tearan.
Ayun, hindi na gumagalaw. Ay, konti. May konti. Ayan.
Bubakan mo kaya dito eh.
Ayan.
May tas mo yun.
Iba rin ang dating pagka nakaangat eh.
Ooh! Awesome!
Ano ba?
Parang sine.
Wow.
So yung gray, ano pa yan? Yan pa yung underpainting. So yan na lang yung part. Natapos ko na yung figures. At saka yung tao ng Lapu-Lapu, tsaka ng Magellan.
Ganda.
Tapos halfway na ako dito sa dagat.
Akala ko manipis na oil na lang sa taas tapos papatungan mo ng papatungan. Hindi pala.
Oo. Ito, nag-umpisa rin yun, yung technique na yung monochrome, yung black and white.
Oo, black and white.
Oo. Yung ancient European technique yun, tawag nila griselle. Parang build up siya. Tapos mag-glazing
Glazing
ka
ka
na
na
lang.
lang.
Oo. Ito, may mga...
Kaso hindi ka nag-glaze ng acrylic eh, no? Gumagamit ka ba ng...
May konti. Oo. So, pag sa umpisa, manipis muna. Actually, merong malumilitaw din na ito glazing lang. Kagaya ng mga highlight dito.
Anong pang nipis?
Roshen. So, nakaano ka muna. Burnt umber para dun sa shadow. At saka titanium white para dun sa mga highlight. Tapos, pag natuyo na siya, yun. Mag-start ka na sa skin tones. Yung Rosena. Tapos, magtitimpla ka na ng tonal values ng burnt sienna.
Pero may hinahalo ka para lumipis siya? Para ipang glaze? Hindi. Or
meron.
pang medium?
Meron medium. Yung, itong polymer. Mas siya eh. Mas malapot siya eh. Kasi kung ang gagamitin mo lang na pang thin yung water, masyadong malabnaw. Masyadong matubig. Pero kung ito, ano kasi siya eh, parang Elmer's glue. Malapot.
Malapot. Tapos medyo semi-transparent lumalabas.
Oo. Tapos, ang kainaman pa, ito kasing mga medium na ganito, nag-slow yung drying process. Dahil yung acrylic, mabilis eh. Pagdating sa composition, ang sinusunod ko yung flow, no? Yung direction ng mata ng tao. So pag tumingin sila, no? Gusto ko lang yung directional lines, no? Itong mga diagonal, yung sa mga weapons, tapos pointing towards the center of interest. Kagaya nitong si Lapu-Lapu. Very academic, very classical yung approach na ganun, na walang vision mo o yung tingin mo doon sa painting na lalabas doon sa frame ng painting. Yung mga nangyayari parang siya, circular. Umiikot-ikot lang na ganyan. Sistema ko rin yan ng pag-position ng mga elements is through contrast. Kung halimbawa, like itong part na ito, maliwanag kasi yung mukha ni Magellan, I have to think of an element na pwedeng tumabi sa kanya na dark. So, inisip ko, ano bang magandang ipwesto rito sa tabi ni Magellan kasi may light. So, ito, yung leg niya, no? Tapos yung armor, tapos yung isang figure. So laging ganun, merong light and dark contrast. Lighting ko lagi, parang lagi nasa nakakoncentrate sa center. No? So halimbawa, for this part, yung mga malalakas na highlight, no? Hindi ko siya pinapaabot dito sa edge. Lagi nandito sa center. Tapos blended yan on both sides from light to dark. Meron din akong mga devices, no, for lighting an element, kagaya nitong face, yung merong reflected light, no. Kahit dito sa right side, nandyan yung strong light, pero dito may mga reflected light, no, yung nagbabounce yung light. At ang source niyan, pwedeng siya nanggagaling dahil kung may malakas na ilaw dito, dahil may ground dito, yung ilaw na tumatama dito sa ground, no, nagbabounce dito sa face.
So this is for added drama.
Oh, for added drama.
This has nothing to do with the actuality of light coming in, but just for you to be able
That's correct.
to add drama to the painting.
Oh. Yun.
Oh my God.
Bakit ko na nakita na it's blue already? Amazing. And we saw this from the beginning, like when Emma was just drawing it. It's like not even the word for it. I mean, from the detail of everybody to, as in everybody, you know, to the expressions on their faces.
Pwede kayong mag-spot the difference. Yun. From that small work to the final work.
Gini-grid mo ba yan, Dina?
Oh, old school nga eh.
Ah?
Naka-grid.
Naka-grid.
Oh, ito oh. Naka-scale siya ng parang 1:1. 1 inches, tapos 12 inches dito sa painting. Ito yung eksena, kita nyo, dun sa shore ng Mactan. Mga depiction ng yung mga Filipino-Spanish relation, no? Yung mga first mass in the Philippines, yung mga pagtayo ng mga first cross in Cebu. Parang lahat ng mga natives, yung mga locals are all bowing to the rulers and the mga foreign colonizers. Pero ito, yung depiction naman ito, it's the other way around. No? Parang sila yung mga victors, tapos sila yung mga losers. Sila yung mga defeated. Kasama si Magellan sa kanyang mga mga army na supposedly parang bastard son ni Magellan. Si Francisco Ravelo. Nung nakita niya na namatay, parang nanghina si Magellan, na-dishearten siya. Kaya natalo siya dun sa battle.
What made you decide to do another painting mo na hindi yung typical na work mo? Parang street scenes. This time it's different. A part of history yung ginawa. Parang medyo nakakapanibago. Bakit?
Noong 2015 kasi, bumiyahe kami ni Plet. No, after nung US trip namin, gusto ko talaga makapunta sa Mexico. Tapos nakita ko yung mga mural nila Diego Rivera, Jose Clemente Orozco, David Alfaro Siqueiros. Pinropose ko kay Jigo, alampay ng canvas. Sabi ko parang gusto kong gumawa ng large scale work na para sa mas maraming audience, para sa mas malawak na public. Tapos paparating yung 500 years of Christianity, yung Quincentennial, diba? 1521 to 2021. So from 2 years ago, pinlano na namin ni Jigo yun. Tapos pinropose namin sa National Museum. Nung review ko yung mga works din ng mga ibang mga works ng mga ibang mga masters, sila Botong, Amorsolo, Manansala. Sabi ko, parang wala pang nagtatakal din sa kay Lapu-Lapu na considered our first hero.
Wala pa?
Meron mga small works, mga maliliit. Yeah. Pero at a grand scale, parang wala akong makita.
Natapos ko na din.
The tattoo! We're all done?
It's all done.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you,
Wow!
Lord.
Congratulations, Mr. Burlongan. Congrats!
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Bathala. Oof! Wow. Talagang, yan, parang it was really a test of endurance, determination, and pinagpahinga talaga ako ng 4 days. Wow. Parang napapaiyak ako sa tuwa. November 8, Monday morning. Itaga natin yan sa bato. Natapos din ang malaki kong painting, The Battle of Mactan.
We have the honor to be the first ones to see this. I could feel the innermost joy of Mr. Borlongan when he uttered gratefulness to the Lord for his finished work. All the hard work devoted in this masterpiece was truly all worth it. We were also entertained by the victory dance, as what Mr. Berlongan calls it. Victory indeed. Mr. Berlongan's work is a reminder how our ancestors fought and resisted the Spaniards. Let us not let the efforts of our early heroes become meaningless. The Battle of Mactan is part of the Pula at Bughaw Shades of an Emerging Nation exhibition at the National Museum of Fine Arts. This is set to travel to 3 key locations in the Philippines next year. The morning session finished with the National Museum's papers focusing on the South and Central Philippines. Now, we would like to acknowledge our participants tuning in from Northern Luzon, particularly Ilocos, Cagayan, and Kalinga. I'm sure the next line of presentations will be of much interest to you. Now, to further understand the lifeways of our pre-colonial ancestors, let us hear from our third presenter. The title of their paper is Pre-Colonial North Luzon Trade and Exchange. The lead author is Dr. Michael Armand Canilao. His co-authors are Maria Lourdes Ingel, Alexandra De Leon, and Maria Eliza Agapin. Dr. Canilao is a research associate of the National Museum of the Philippines. He is also a research associate of the Nigoni Integrative Center of the Field Museum in Chicago, USA. He is a consultant to the National Security Council and also a member of the pool of experts of the coastal cities at risk in the Philippines of Ateneo de Manila University. He finished his doctorate in anthropology at the University of Illinois at Chicago, where he also received a master's in environmental and urban geography and a master's in anthropology. He also earned a master's in archaeology at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Everyone, let's all welcome the presenter and lead author, Dr. Michael Armand Canilao.
Good day. Good day. This is Paper 3, North Luzon Trade and Exchange, with Michael Armand P. Canilao, National Museum of the Philippines Research Associate, Maria Lourdes Ingel, National Museum of the Philippines, Alessandra De Leon, National Museum of the Philippines, and Maria Eliza Agabin, First District of Ilocos Sur. This paper argues that at Spanish contact in the 16th century, parts of northwest Luzon could be characterized as producers caught in the margins of an Indian Ocean, West Philippine Sea trade system. An interesting case study is the copper and gold production that arguably was close to industrial scale just before Spanish usurpation. This is clearly illustrated in the case of the Lepanto mines and the takeover of its operations from the natives by the Cantabro Filipino Company, a Spanish copper and gold mining outfit. With the changing of the guards over control of the mines, there was also a notable degradation of the northern Benguet forest cover, an infusion of mining tailings in drainage systems in the area, probably contributing to climate change in the long haul. The paper will begin by illustrating the geographic distribution of settlements as part of a putative peer polity articulation, arguably the prerequisite to be participants in the Indian Ocean West Philippine Sea trade as a permanent market. Core thesis is that the Spanish authorities needed only to take control of the wheel rather than reinvent the wheel of maritime trade between Northwest Luzon and its overseas trade partners. The paper will then look at artifacts found in the region and a few examples of museum collections in the National Museum, Ilocos Regional Complex that represent the cosmopolitan way of life brought about by trade overseas. Spotlight will also be focused on the surviving traditional crafts that depict historical continuity of these traditions, revealing the importance of internal trade in sustaining heritage. Utilizing overland trails and riverine passages, Raw products are brought to coastal settlements that served as conduits between the maritime trade ships and the interior producers. Here you can see a map from the 19th century, Idea Aproximada del Territorio entre Cagayan e Ilocos. This particular map shows some of the trails connecting the interiors and the coastal settlements. This is a photo of a biray in Kawayan, Ilocos Sur, at the mouth of the Mestizo River, dated January 1986. These type of vessels were sturdy enough to cross to the continental shelf, passing through Calayan, Batanes, and Taiwan in the Northern Passage. This is a photo of backpack-laden igorots in Lepanto. These igorots usually accompanied American geologists, prospectors, and explorers at the time. They navigated the same terrestrial trails or land trails and riverine passages between the upland and the lowland, which was used even during the early historical period. Arguably, the early historical period saw the reshaping of the settlement patterns from an articulation convenient for an evanescent market encounter towards a permanent market one. By the advent of Spanish colonization, the market system, trade relations, and connections are already well established, thus the Spanish authorities merely had to take control of the wheels literally. This is notable in terms of the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade and its reliance on trade between China and Luzon. While the final early historical period saw the use of debt patronage or extreme utang na loob, it's a sort of currency in the market, it is the use of colonial currency and political hegemony that imposed itself on the market and further pushed the primary producers to the margins of well-being. This is a digital elevation model of northwestern Luzon. Anchors are coastal maritime trading centers. Pickaxe and hammers are production sites or mines. And chevrons for bulking stations or bulk breaking points. What follows is a drone imagery that will show us the narrow coastal area south of La Union towards Pangasinan. What you immediately notice is that mountains immediately tower after the narrow coastal belt. Note that the peak seen in this video is Mount Santo Tomas near the historical bulking center of Tonglo. The hallmark of the peer polity approach is that it looks at how social complexity emerges as an offshoot of increased information and material sharing among a group of otherwise autonomous socio-political units, which are situated beside or close to each other within a single geographical region. Thus, it is the objective of the archaeologist to look for structural homologies that indicate interpolity relations among peer polities. But there is a thin red line separating peer polity interaction and circumscription under a state or bigger political entity, both of which can be inferred based on artifact distribution. Thus, one must look for indicators of autonomy but membership within a society of polities. And arguably, the settlements in coastal northwest Luzon were autonomous settlements, yet at the same time members of a society of coastal maritime trading centers that serviced maritime vessels that sojourned through the archipelago. It is argued that the spatio-geographic distribution, which is shown in this map with the Tisan polygons, can be best understood in the lens of political economy. The settlements maintained their equidistant boundaries and were not forced to assimilate one or the other, while these polities or chiefdoms were endowed with defensive and offensive capabilities. Maintaining their boundaries enabled them to trade freely with the sojourning maritime vessels. The best analogy will literally be a market, talaat in Thai, where different polities set up individual shops with very similar identical products, except each will be trying to offer the best deal to the maritime traders who are passing through their shores. To begin the discussion on the climate change felt in this region of the Philippines, we can refer to this figure, which shows the rapid decline in forest cover in northwest Luzon within a century's time. That's 1900 to 1999. This deforestation contributes to global warming and is one of the enablers to climate change. Perhaps in light of deforestation, we can look at the case of the Cantabro Filipino in North Benguet. This is a classic example of a colonial project that took over an already existing extractive industry in northwestern Luzon. The entry of the Spaniards further industrialized copper and gold mining, and its impact on the environment can be seen in the discharge of pollution in the Abra and Amburayan river systems, as well as the denudation of the forest to be able to use hard timber for mine support structures. At this juncture, we shift gears to look at examples of museum collections in the National Museum of the Philippines Ilocos Regional Museum Complex that represent the cosmopolitan way of life brought about by the participation of the Ilocos region in overseas trade. Examples of archaeologically excavated artifacts from the Ilocos Sur Archaeology Project of 2011 and 2012 are also included in the following discussion as interlocutors. Artifacts found in archaeological sites in the Ilocos region, including Calanuchian site in 2011-2012, provide evidence of flourishing settlements and trade centers in northwestern Luzon prior to Spanish contact. The artifacts recovered from the Calanuchian site had some similarities to those found in the Bolinao site in Pangasinan, just beyond the Lingayen Gulf in the 1970s. Ethnographic objects from North Luzon that were sourced in the early 20th century found in the National Museum of the Philippines Ilocos Regional Museum Complex also reflect cultural continuities and transformations in the region through the centuries. While the local earthenware, gold, and other metal artifacts tell us of artisanship as well as of inland or internal trade, items such as glazed trade ceramics and glass beads yielded by the same area reflect our ancient communities' active maritime trade with neighbors in the Southeast Asia region. At this juncture, we can look at an intra-regional example to further surmise the connections that these glass beads symbolize when it comes to Northwest Luzon. At this juncture, we will look at the examples in Negros Oriental, specifically in Bacong. The participation of ancient Filipino communities in exchanges with Indian Ocean social groups is evidenced by the presence of stone and glass beads across a number of sites in Negros Oriental, south of Northwest Luzon. These are dated to Metal Age at about 2,000 years ago. Chemical analysis of glass beads through laser ablation, inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry, indicates that majority of glass beads recovered from jar burial sites in Bacong are composed of mineral soda alumina type 1 glass that is ultimately sourced from South Indian or the Sri Lankan region. Furthermore, garnet, amethyst, and quartz beads recovered from the same jar burial sites in Bacong are technologically drilled using typical Indian technology that also suggests an Indian provenience for stone beads. This provides clear trade connections with the Indian Ocean as early as 2,000 years ago. This is a direct evidence of the Chinese connection to Northwest Luzon. A Chinese coin fragment was excavated from Calanutian site of the Ilocos Sur Archaeology Project back in 2011. Note the Chinese character embossed in this particular coin. It is the script of Pao, which literally means treasure, according to Miss Eleanor Marie S. Lim. She is one of the Ilocos Sur Archaeology Project core team members. From the oral history shared by 81-year-old Fidel Go, a Filipino-Chinese who was conferred the National Folk Artist Award for his Brunei craft, Chinese migrants from Fukien province in the southeastern part of China brought the Brunei technology to Vigan, as they saw that locally sourced clay was viable for the pottery that may be made in Xijiao, Xinjiang, in Fukien. According to oral accounts passed on to him, Go, whose grand-uncle established one of the Brunei factories in Vigan around the latter part of the 19th century, shared that the Chinese who earlier came to Vigan to trade and later to settle thought of establishing the stonecraft of Xijiao in Vigan, given the availability of this clay. Go's own kin thus came to Vigan with the same prospect, which coincided with a time when the pottery business back home, at least in Xijiao, has declined. In this next slide, you see an example of an excavated spindle whorl from the Calanutian site in Ilocos Sur. Apart from the large number of earthen potsherds found in Calanutian, spindle whorls and fishnet sinkers made of baked clay were also excavated. These local earthenware products reveal three kinds of artisanships in Calanutian and in the areas within which it was articulated. First, there was pottery of the open firing kind that in the Ilocos language is generically referred to as damili. And second and third, specifically as shown by the spindle whorls, there was the local manufacture of cotton yarn and abel Iloco, the handloom textile weaving tradition of the Ilocos region. Prior to Spanish contact, communities in northwestern Luzon cultivated cotton and tapped plant dyes along with weaving their cloth both for domestic use and for trade. Generically referred to as capas in Iloco, several species of the cotton plant grew in the wild, their flowers harvested for their fibers to be ginned, beaten, and spun into yarn using manually operated implements. The species used to make cotton yarns was different from the cotton shrub species that had been growing in plantations, as well as from the kapasanglay. To distinguish, a few informants in interior communities in Ilocos Sur describe the native cotton plants that yields fibers for weaving as a tree that grows to about 2 to 3 meters in height and whose pods are bigger than those of the cotton shrubs found in plantations. Nowadays, there are a few textile weavers that continue traditions that manifest the close links of the Ilocos to the upland communities of the Cordilleras. It is crucial to emphasize that the surviving weavers are located at the strategic coastal settlements such as Bantay, a satellite settlement of the capital, Vigan, and its competing peer polities of Candon and Tagudin. Upland communities such as the Kankanai, Bontoc, Ibaloy continue to visit these weavers to request orders and gather the finished textiles. Juanita Quitoriano of Agaguman, Tagudin, weaves sinubur, a burial blanket for the upland communities of the Kankanai and Ibaloy. Salvacion Ramos of Bagani, Campo, Candon City was master weaver of the special ritual burial cloths for upland communities of the Kankanai and Bontoc. She passed away in 2009. Various fishnet sinkers were found in the Calanutian site of the Ilocos Sur Archaeology Project. And even up to now, we can see in this slide that these sinkers are molded out of locally sourced clay by specialists in the pottery community of Paratong in the city of Vigan. 14th to 15th century Vietnamese and Chinese ceramics have been particularly identified from the trade wares yielded by the Calanutian site in Sinait, Ilocos Sur. A large volume of Vietnamese sherds were found, indicating the Luzon, Philippine, Champan trade links that offer proof of our ancestors' way of life as sailors who crossed the seas in their own locally built birai to reach trade sites such as Champa in Vietnam and the Kimai areas of present-day Cambodia. In this slide, you will see a close-up of the fine craftsmanship of tambourine. These are necklaces made by master craftsman Nelson Alonzo, and it reveals the advanced techniques in goldsmithing in Ilocos that continues until today. Tambur refers to the drum-like frame wherein filigree is soldered, often a combination of beads and fine threads design. The only remaining goldsmithing family in Ilocos Sur is headed by master craftsman Nelson Alonzo. He is a fourth-generation goldsmith in the western part of the town, Bantay, contiguous to Vigan City. He continues to use traditional goldsmithing equipment to continue and preserve the art of tambourine making, which he learned from his father. This gold sheet is a mouth orifice cover that was excavated from Kalanutian site, Sinait, Ilocos Sur, in 2012. And now we have reached the conclusion of the paper. The paper illustrated that the geographic distribution of settlements as part of a putative peer polity articulation was arguably the prerequisite to be participants in the Indian Ocean West Philippine Sea trade network as a permanent market. We also see a leveled up denudation of forests at Spanish takeover of the mines, as well as introduction of cash crop economies, which in the long haul contributed to climate change. The paper was also able to present artifacts and museum collections in National Museum, Ilocos Regional Complex that represent the cosmopolitan way of life brought about by trade overseas in Northwest Luzon. Spotlight was also focused on surviving traditional crafts that depict historical continuity even today. Thank you very much, and we would like to acknowledge the National Museum of the Philippines, National Historical Commission of the Philippines, Philippine International Quincentennial Conference Committee, the Honoria Family of Sinait, Ilocos Sur, First District of Ilocos Sur, and Provincial Government of Ilocos Sur through Honorable Deogracias D.V. Savellano, Deputy Speaker of the House. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Canilao, for that enlightening presentation on the pre-colonial North Luzon trade and exchange. Congratulations to your team. The next paper presentation is entitled Ancestors from 700,000 Years Ago, Some Evidences from Cagayan Kalinga Sites. The lead author is Marian Reyes. Her co-authors are Thoma Injico of MNHN in Paris, France, Maricar Bellarmino, Abigail Castro, and John Rui Conrad Nogon. Our presenter, Marian, is a senior museum researcher at the Archaeology Division of the National Museum of the Philippines, a graduate of Bachelor of Arts of Anthropology and Masters in Archaeology at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her research interests include the study of human and animal remains, particularly small mammals. Since 2015, she has been a member of the core team that has been exploring and excavating the 709,000-year-old archaeological site in Rizal, Kalinga. Everyone, let's all welcome the presenter and lead author,
Good day, I am Marian Peace Archaeology Division. I will be presenting on behalf of my co-authors and Kalinga teammates, Dr. Thomas Engico of MNHN in Paris, France, who is an NMP Research Associate and co-site director of the Kalinga Archaeological Project, and my fellow researchers Maricar Bellarmino from the Archaeology Division, and Abigail Castro and Jaan Rui Conrad Nogot from the Geology and Paleontology Division. Like the previous talk, the focus of our presentation will also be on Luzon, specifically on the northeastern area of Cagayan and Kalinga. First, let me briefly put this talk into context with the NMP mandate. The NMP is mandated by law to be the agency responsible in collecting and research in the field and laboratory, info dissemination, and preservation of cultural heritage of the country. This presentation will discuss the oldest archaeological site in the Philippines thus far, the decades of research of the NMP and the collaborators in the area, the findings and results implication in a broader perspective. Our goal is to show through material evidence gathered a picture of the distant past, 709,000 years ago to be exact, when the climatic and environmental conditions were a lot different than today and when an early human ancestor peopled our lands. This is a section of the Life Through Time exhibition at the 5th floor of NMNH, a gallery giving us a glimpse in the past through the different fossils discovered from around the country. The section depicts a time when more of the islands are emerging and the sea level is lower that terrestrial organisms appeared. To be highlighted in this photo are naturally preserved remains of once living megafauna. These organisms are already extinct and are known only through their fossils. Our reconstruction of the tusk fragments of Stegodon luzonensis discovered in Solana, Cagayan. Nesarhinus philippinensis, synonymous with Rhinoceros philippinensis, represented by the right upper jaw with molar from the province of Rizal. Elephas molar tooth from the Rizal province on the left, and Megalocheles, formerly Manuria sundari fossils from Cagayan, Kalinga Apayao, and Rizal province, and Celebucerus cagayanensis, a new species of an extinct prehistoric pig found in Cagayan Valley, thought to have existed only until the Pleistocene period, or 2.58 million to 11,700 years ago. It was published in 2014 by co-authors Toma and Abigail. The Cagayan Valley hosts the majority of the prehistoric fossils of large mammals. The exact reason as to why these large mammals went extinct in the country is yet to be studied. From extinct megafauna in the past, let us now proceed to the early peopling of the Philippines. In the Philippines, the search for the evidence of early human began in Tabon, Palawan, where the frontal bone or skull cap of a gracile individual of our species, Homo sapiens sapiens, dated 47 to 32,000 years ago, was recovered by Dr. Robert Fox's team. Just recently, the finger bone of the Kallao hominin in Cagayan was established to be of a new human species, Homo luzonensis, dated 67,000 years ago, with the retrieval of more fossil remains by Dr. Arman Mijares' team. The Cagayan Valley region has been a hotspot for many exciting scientific discoveries in the last couple of years. Publications on the new species of humans, small mammals who lived alongside humans, and rock art in Peña Blanca, Cagayan. But did you know that the potential of finding evidence of early human presence in the region has been established since decades ago? The aerial image on the background of the Luzon map shows that the Paleolithic sites in the area are within the same geological formation called Awidon Mesa, here running through the provincial boundaries of Cagayan and Kalinga. In these areas, surface finds such as these megafaunal remains, stone tools, tektites, and petrified wood are especially noticeable after kainin, like in these photos. Because these are surface finds, their association is unclear. It is clear, however, that the area has potential for Pleistocene-old materials. In this 1950s letter from mining prospector Lawrence Wilson, then affiliated with Henry Ottly Bayer, he writes Gustav Heinrich Ralph von Königswald, German paleontologist who discovered the Homo erectus skull in Java in 1936. He reports on how in 1935, a rhinoceros jaw associated with petrified wood was discovered in Laya Valley, Cagayan, almost on the Cagayan-Isabela boundary line by Eustaquio Dalupang. 14 pieces of large and small teeth from the jaw were collected and taken home a year later by a group of locals. The soil matrix was too hard and the bone comparatively too soft and brittle for them. They took out what teeth they could and brought them home. Some that were not eventually lost were brought by Jose Datul to Manila and later turned over to Bayer. who was then connected with the NMP. He preserved them in Watson Building, Avila Street in Manila. Wilson also tells about his 1954 survey with guide Alfonso Baguno to the hills where the rhino jaw was found. Though unsuccessful in locating the site, they saw that primitive men had been in the area for a long time. In 1957 to 1958, two surveys in Cagayan Valley along the rolling knolls of Cabalwan, presently within the Rizal municipality of Kalinga, were done by von Koenigswald with Wilson as guide. Though no fossils were found, there were cobblestone tools which he later published. Upon the request of Bayer, von Koenigswald studied the fossil materials among Bayer's collection for weeks while in the Philippines after attending the 4th Far Eastern Prehistory Congress and the 8th Pacific Science Congress in 1953. In 1956, he described the Rhinoceros philippinensis fossils in a publication. These discoveries propelled the Paleolithic research in the Philippines. In the early 1960s, though the geologic and archaeological research projects of NMP was launched initially in Palawan to investigate the early man in the Philippines, by late 1960s, research shifted to Cagayan Valley due to fossils and stone tools turning up in areas like the Madrigal and Espinosa sites. In the 1970s, archaeological research in Cagayan Valley Pleistocene sites gained interest from local and international communities and produced a lot of publications. The 1972 Presidential State of the Nation Address, or SONA, encouraged researches in archaeology, anthropology, and history in pursuit of establishing Filipino ancestry and extending financial support for these kinds of studies. Presidential Decree 1109 series of 1977 was also enacted, declaring the archaeological areas in Cagayan Valley and Kalinga Apayao as archaeological reservations. It states that preliminary findings indicate that area could have been the habitation of the oldest human being in the Philippines, and that these delineated by the excavation of the NMP are hereby declared archaeological reservations. Here are a few photos from our archives of then NMP staff working out in the field in Cagayan Valley. In 1981, a geological survey conducted by Matheson and Bonja suggested that the vertebrate fossils found in situ were transported and buried in the stream deposits between the toe of the alluvial fan and the Palio Cagayan River. Sheldon Clyde Hagon, who was a lithic specialist trained in France, led a field school of Erasmus Mundus students in 2008, where in the report he noted that the explorations around the area resulted in the retrieval of cobblestones and flake tools from the surface. Clyde was part of the project's core team, who have sadly passed on early this year. The archaeological exploration and excavation at Solana, Cagayan, at the Espinosa Tusk site and Pirit site west of Solana was a research endeavor of John DeVos and Angel Bautista in 2001. There, they found a stegodon tusk on the surface, faunal remains such as long bones, ribs, vertebra, and hand and foot bones of elephant, as well as stone tools below the surface. In 2010, the flake tools from Cabalwan were declared as National Cultural Treasure, a distinction given to highly valued cultural properties that are indispensable in the understanding of history and culture of the Philippines. A survey in 2013 was made along the western bank of the Cagayan Valley to establish a clear connection of the vertebrate remains, stone tools, and tektites. The location of the new excavation site was decided upon the discovery of several stone tool artifacts and faunal remains, including the Suidcelabocerus cagayanensis, on the slopes of two approximately 10-meter high hills joined by a micro-valley with seasonal runoff waters. Recognizing that the archaeological surface remains were found at two distinct elevations along the slopes, it seemed clear that erosion far from their original sedimentary layers was unlikely. Excavations proceeded the following year. The site lies in the municipality of Rizal in Kalinga, formerly identified as within Matamengue fauna on Flores Island, which includes the putative ancestor of Homo floresiensis, and the Walanay fauna on the southwestern branch of Sulawesi. The fossilized rhino skeleton from Kalinga is the most complete prehistoric animal documented in situ in the country. Through this discovery, new insights on the evolutionary history and dispersal pattern of Asian rhinos were made. The Philippine rhino is a type specimen for the new extinct genus Nessorhinus, shared by the rhino from Taiwan. Meanwhile, microfossil paleobotanical research are ongoing to expand our understanding of the past environment and landscape of the Kalinga site. After an unsuccessful attempt at pollen extraction and analysis, phytoliths or silicified plant cells from the sediments are currently being considered for further analysis. Co-author Maricar's preliminary findings suggest the presence of several Poaceae or grass family phytoliths of different forms conforming with the tree savanna and grassland vegetation inhabited by the Middle Pleistocene fauna, as hypothesized by Matheson in his 1981 dissertation. However, the site's current vegetation is also dominated by grasses. Thus, methods and techniques are still being fine-tuned to eliminate possible contamination of the samples. To conclude, hominins were present in the Philippine Islands as early as 709,000 years ago, making the discovery a tenfold leap back in time. These Kalinga tool makers are not ancestors of present-day Filipino people, but are from a different species of humans. But who? If the Kalinga tool makers had the same route as Nessorhinus and potentially Celebucerus, that's from north to south, then its ancestors could be in China. However, it is also possible that they colonized the Philippines from the west via Borneo and Taiwan, so their ancestors could also be on Java Island. By the time the rhino of Kalinga was butchered in both China and Java, Homo erectus was existing. I will end with a statement from Bondok, which sums up the quest for the early human in Cagayan Valley. Yielded from the Kalinga site material remains were cut-marked fossil fauna of the extinct rhino in association with lithic materials. Those are indirect evidence on the early human presence in the Philippines at 709,000 years ago. We look forward to discovering and sharing the direct evidence of those early human ancestors. Meanwhile, the search continues in Cagayan, Kalinga sites. Thank you. The authors wish to thank the National Museum of the Philippines, the committee, and organizers for having us in this session, the Municipal LGU of Rizal, Kalinga, the Kalinga team members from 2013 to 2019, and our funding agencies. Do visit our website at www.nationalmuseum.gov.ph to explore our collections, ongoing and upcoming exhibitions and events, and to book your NNP appointment. You may also visit our social media pages for our Museum from Home programs such as Travel Tuesday and Fossil Friday series, and a lot more.
Investigation in a site in Rizal, Kalinga, where the earliest evidence of hominin presence in the Philippines was uncovered. Their works in the site have started in 2014. Congratulations to your team, Marian. We have learned so much since this morning from our first presenter down to the fourth presenter. Before we move on to the last presenter, let's have a 5-minute health break. See you everyone after 5 minutes. We're back. We are now on the fifth and last paper, which is entitled Pula at Bukao, Shades of an Emerging Philippine Nation. The lead author is Dr. Marian Ubalde. Her co-authors are Dr. Ana Maria Teresa Labrador, Saidiel Santos, Maylene Rondal, Jadian Pascual, and Marivin Santos. Our paper presenter, Dr. Ubalde, is a senior museum researcher at the NMP Ethnology Division. She finished her PhD at Hokkaido University in the field of history and the area studies major in museology. She earned her bachelor's degree in anthropology and her master's of arts in Asian studies major in Japan studies at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her research interests include ethnic and minority groups, intangible cultural heritage, and participatory and ethnological museums. Let's all welcome Dr. Marian Ubalde.
Good afternoon, everyone.
I'm Marian
Ubalde,
Ubalde, and I will be presenting our paper entitled Pula at Bugao, Shades of an Emerging Philippine Nation. So this will be the content of my presentation today. But to begin with, colors encompass various aspects of our everyday lives since time immemorial. In the ancient times, people painted in rocks or caves before even building their own houses to settle in. Pre-Austronesian rock art is characterized by hand stencils and figurative animal paintings that are typically done in a single color, either in red or purple, or sometimes a combination of both. So this can be seen in several sites across the world, such as in Spain, in southern France, and also in Argentina. And these paintings, the pigments identified included charcoal, anhydrated hematite, and natural earth pigment known as red ochre. And for the case of Argentina, it included also the use of iron oxides for the red and purple dye, and also kaolin or the white clay, as well as manganese oxide for the black pigment, along with some form of binders. So in Asia, the oldest figurative art to have been found so far is in Sulawesi, Indonesia, depicting several images of the Sulawesi warty pig. And normally the colors are in red or dark or purplish, using mulberry and also mineral pigments from ochre. In India, the one from Bhimbetka rock shelters, red and white are the most dominant colors, and the red pigment comes from iron ore like hematite, and also white from kaolin white clay. So basically, for the prehistoric arts, inorganic pigments coming from mineral origins and also charcoal from wood or burnt bone are usually used. And many of the use would be either in red and black or a combination of both. So the concept or the perception of colors in the prehistoric society was said to be heavily influenced by man's connection to nature, such as I think the most basic would be earth and sky. So that's why for the warm red or the yellow colors, they are normally associated with the feminine or earth, while blue or dark or black would be associated with masculine. It's actually interesting to note that some would say that the red in the Chinese and Taiwanese flag represents earth. So these tricolors of white, red, and black as the basic perceived colors is particularly observed in several societies in Africa, Australia, and also Oceania. In fact, many Slavic nations today adopted the three colors or their symbolism in their national flags. So there are actually many theories and discussions about color, but for this presentation, I would point out some of those. First would be for the term red, for the color, it's always the best developed system around the world. So many societies would have their own term specific to the color red. And also, there is the frequent confusion between the colors blue and green. So that is why there are some linguists who would who introduce the term GRU to refer to those societies that cannot seem to distinguish between the colors blue and green. And also, for the minimal color terminology, red would somehow be used to represent the long wavelength colors, while dark would be used for the short wavelength colors. And also, there is always that confusion for the short wavelength colors that colors such as blue and violet would be denoted as either black or gray. So to continue and focusing on the Philippines, well, colonialism that started from the 15th century may have brought about tremendous influences to several countries around the world. Historians and linguists argue that many of the native languages have their own existing color scheme of naming at the time of contact with the West. As a matter of fact, the use of red hematite as pigment in potteries and cave rock art have been reported from different archaeological sites in Southeast Asia, which would somehow indicate that our ancestors have already their preconceived notions of colors. Along with the Philippines, red slips using hematite on pottery were found in several sites also in Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So in this picture, as you can see, my tomb jar used red hematite, and this was found in Ayub Cave in Sarangani province in Mindanao. Aside from the red and black from organic materials, the black paint may also indicate that where the hair of the dead has been used. And also, the pre-Spanish gold ornaments had also been used as part of the ancient burial practices, evidenced by the excavated death mask in Butuan, Iloilo, and Uton. Aside from this, as discussed earlier by the presenters, we also have the banton cloth with use of black and red. And this is supposedly the oldest example of ikat cloth in Southeast Asia. And the red pigment used in this was from morinda plant. So in the Philippines, in many of the ethno-linguistic groups, somehow an indication of the perceived colors is evident even in the contemporary period. For example, among the Hanono people of the Philippines, the four basic terms of colors are associated with lightness, darkness, wetness, dryness. So somehow they also point to the vegetation system. So the value of clothing, for example, or ornaments would also rely on the proportion or sharpness of the contrast between these colors. Among the Iwak as well, the three colors is observed, although it has to be noted that the varieties of sweet potatoes were also classified or differentiated through their colors that would range from white to yellow, orange to red, and violet. So among the Tiboli, especially in their Tinalak tradition, the red, black, and white colors seem to play important role as well. So for these colors, they tend to represent specific symbolism. For example, red would symbolize the souls who died violently by the bullet or blade, while bukoy or the white would symbolize those who perished an untimely death by their own hands. On the other hand, hitim or black would refer to souls who died of natural cause or passed away peacefully. Among the Ilongot, the color red is associated with blood or concentrated anger, also focused energy, as well as a joyous heart inside a healthy body. So taken into context, because headhunting is part of their tradition, red is opposed to white in a way that health is opposed to illness, while for concentrated anger, red is opposed to black, the way that anger is opposed to incompetence. So that is why among the Ilongot headhunters, after the hunting ritual, the beheader would wear the red hornbill, either the headdress or also the batling or the earrings made from the hornbill. So, as can be inferred, red seems to play an important role in the pre-colonial Philippine society. So, taken into context, red from Sanskrit, rudira means blood, while the term rud means to be red. So, in Philippine languages, as somehow can be inferred from what I discussed earlier, there are several variations or derivatives of the term pula or red, which appears to be widely used across the country. Of course, not to discount that there are also other terms that I have not written in here. So, in a sense, we can classify the sociocultural significance of red in the Philippine society into three. So, first, as a symbol of blood or focused energy. As I mentioned earlier, this is particularly true with those societies, ethno-linguistic groups with headhunting rituals and practice. So, and also as a symbol of power, since, for example, among the Mandaya, only the headman and the priestess would wear red garments. And for ritual or spiritual purposes, for example, among the Agta, hinidul or red loincloth is worn on ceremonial occasions. Okay, so in the Philippines, there are many sources of red pigments. This includes, among others, cinnabar and also hematite. So for cinnabar, this one has this is an ore of mercury actually. So it has a bright red color, but because of its toxicity, its use has been discontinued for many decades. But in many ancient cultures, powdered cinnabar was used on ceramics, murals, tattoos, and also religious ceremonies. Hematite, on the other hand, is a principal iron ore and primarily used in jewelry, but also used as paint pigment, especially in some ancient cave rock art in Anda and Bohol. So in the Manonggol jar also, the exhumed bones were said to be covered with red pigments and traces of hematite was found. So this one is locally distributed and available in several sites in the Philippines from north to south. So aside from mineral, botanical sources is also available in the Philippines. And one of the most commonly used is noni or morinda. And this is an example of a textile among the Bagobo using morinda as dye pigment for red. So as you can see, it yields different hues as well. So Nara also, as well as Atsuete, are sources of red pigments. And as we all know, Atsuete is also used as food colorant. And as I have mentioned earlier, the hornbill is one of the, I think, important birds among the ethno-linguistic groups in the Philippines, especially among the Ilongot, since they are highly prized and are worn only by the warriors or the beheaders after the hunting ritual, the head hunting ritual. So to continue, many historians and anthropologists accounted that in ancient times there is actually no name for blue because it was just typically classified or grouped with the dark colors. But looking into the term nila, which means dark blue in Sanskrit, however, it has been argued that the first time that the term nila was used in Rig Veda, it refers not to color blue per se, but to black or dark brown color. So in the Philippines, unlike red, we do not have a lot of terms to refer to color blue. However, we have the term bughaw, although we are still confirming the etymology of the term. But we have names for indigo, or maybe we can say it's violet or purple. And as it is also used as a common source of the blue pigment or dye in the Philippines. So along with that, there are several terms used for indigo, such as anil, anyl, tayum, and dagong. So again, we should not forget that this term may just denote the colors black to dark brown. There are also some theory that the name of Manila or Maynila actually came from the term nila, which could indicate either the presence of the indigo plant or the indigo as a dyeing tradition here. Okay, so like red, blue or black or blue or black blue seem to play also an important role in the Philippine ethno-linguistic societies. So textiles that are dyed from ranging from dark blue to blue black are tend to be used only by the upper ranks or kachangyan among the Buntok, kadangyan among the Ifugao, and the babaknang among the Ilocano in the Ilocos region. Aside from that, death blankets were also found in several ethno-linguistic groups in the Philippines, such as those from the Ibaloy, Isenay, and also the Buntok for the Pinangulawan, wherein normally this cloth are used to wrap the corpse or used as a waistcoat along with white ikat designs. So aside from its funerary use, it seems that indigo dyed textiles are highly valued, such as among the Hanono, wherein dyed those garments that have been dyed repeatedly that yields deep blue color are valued mostly. And also among the Mandaya, heavily embroidered garment with a dark blue hue called dagum are only worn by those belonging to the upper class and or during special occasions or gatherings. So aside from being used as dye for textiles, anyl is also being used as medicine in some parts of the Philippines, such as in North Luzon and also in Bicol region. They would put mixed anyl with vinegar and apply this to the cheek of a person suffering from mumps. And it's also believed to heal or dry culebra or shingles in some parts of the Philippines. So for the sources of the blue pigments, azurite is the only mineral source of blue found in the Philippines. And from that, we also have, as I mentioned earlier, indigo that is commonly used as a dye pigment for textiles. And its colors would range from blue to blue black. So these are just examples of different textiles using indigo as dye. These ones, the blue and white porcelain and ceramics are considered to be traded items, and most would come from China. And they are found mostly in Palawan and Bontoc area. So this is just a preliminary and exploratory paper. So from what we have so far, we are saying that color naming in the Philippines signifies that it refers to both the colors and the object. So for example, in Bicol also, when we say red, aside from pula, we also have the term baga, which means red. But when we say baga, it means fire. So this is somewhat similar to what I have been discussing earlier. And this is also true for other colors like yellow. If we say dilaw or dulaw, it could either refer to the yellow color or turmeric, the source of the yellow color as well. So given all the discussions, it seems that red, black, along with white and yellow, so are colors that our ancestors has been passed down to us. We have to remember that black can also be interpreted that blue is embedded in it. It's just that we tend to classify more now and separate the dark colors and be more specific about it. So we can say that in almost all of the ethno-linguistic groups in the Philippines, darkness and saturation of color were traditionally contrasted to brightness. However, color saturation was also opposed to relative weakness of color or colorness. So this has been established, right, among the ancient societies as I have been discussing earlier. So black here may also signify the color blue, especially among our pre-colonial ancestors. So for example, in Ilocano and Itneg, nangisit or gadang na sitnit means just dark or black. And it's interesting also to know that in Ilocano, the term sinanglaw is a dark dish colored by bile of kambing or baka or kalabaw. So I think we also have to think about why blue somehow also became equated with dugong bughaw or having the idea of something rare. And our initial hypothesis is that because of the presence of the blue porcelain and other trade items, only those in the upper scale of the society could afford this. That's why it has been accorded, the meaning of being precious or rare. And as I have mentioned, blue pigment is not that abundant compared to other pigments. So maybe that's also one of the reasons why it acquired the meaning of being, valuable or rare. So blue, when you say blue, I think we may also refer to, the Philippines being in a place where it has international connection because of the presence of the blue ceramics and also the indigo trading, especially in the 15th, 16th century. So representing all the maritime routes, being an island nation, an archipelagic nation. So from there, we are hypothesizing that maybe when we think about the colors of our Philippine flag, we may interpret it as carrying also the following symbolism. The continuity of the Filipino lineage connected by blood, represented by the red color, and blue, with us Filipinos recognizing and honoring our dead ancestors. So that is why the presence of death blankets that are colored in black or blue, black, and white. At the same time, we also try to situate our location, our place, in relation to our neighboring societies. So finally, given all this, we have to say that climate change has been impacting not only the Philippines, but also the world. When we talk about connections, it's a shared problem for all of us. So, for example, in the Philippines, there have been traditions that has been probably affected by the shifting climate. So, for example, among the Bogobo, it has been accounted that kalibating, a type of mushroom, which is used for the red dye, is now only heard of in their epic singing. Aside from that, hornbill, because of the continuous forest degradation and habitat loss, and of course exacerbated by the substantial hunting pressures, the hornbill has been put under the vulnerable category in the Philippines. And finally, the discovery of bats in San Narciso, Zambales somehow attests to how much climate change and also catastrophic events highly impacts traditional and cultural heritage in an area. So from the fieldwork of some of the museum personnel in 2015, it has been said that these large vats were used um, to extract indigo dye from plants, and many of those were found near streams or bodies of water. Although in its current location, it has not been found at all. But they were supposedly used before by Abel weavers to dye the threads. However, there are no more existing weavers in town, and the last one was the mother of one of the informants who already passed away. So its current, according also to interviews with some of the locals, there used to be creeks and small tributaries used to be in proximity in some of the baldes. And also the Pinatubo eruption in 1991 caused some of this to sink deeper. So they used to be higher and deeper. Of course, the eruption was rather recent, but this only gives us an idea of how much catastrophic events would also affect cultural heritage and traditions in one area. So given all this, active intervention is needed from different sectors of the society. So for example, DOST PTRI is doing some research to have a more sustainable source of pigments, so from natural sources, since it has been established that indigo dyeing is harmful or toxic to the environment. So we at the museum, we of course reaffirming our role in the society, um, actively support such kinds of initiative, and also we are trying to reinforce other things that we can do, such as improving and the active partnership and collaboration with the descendant communities. I mean, after all, we all live in the same world and we are all interconnected. So this ends my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Dr. Ubalde for that eye-opening presentation that features part of our national collections in the fields of archaeology, geology, ethnography, and botany. We hope the paper can encourage further studies on color science, particularly pigment and dye studies, one that has not been widely explored in the Philippines. Are you now ready for the plenary discussion? May I call on Jadian Pascual, the officer in charge of the NMP Botany and National Herbarium Division, to facilitate the plenary discussion. Let us welcome once again our speakers, Dr. Canilao, Marian, and Dr. Ubalde.
All right, so hi everyone. Magandang hapon, good afternoon, and maayong hapon sa tanan. So I'm JB and I'll be moderating the session, our last session for today. So first, let me thank our speakers, Dr. Canilao, Ian, Ms. Marian Reyes, Dr. Obalde, for taking us through time in your presentations. You know, indeed, your studies are testament of the richness of our cultural heritage from the early presentations in the morning, which brought us to the south of the Philippines, to the central Visayas, and now we're here in the northwestern Luzon and to the northeastern side of Luzon, which covered and highlighted several interesting studies. You know, overseas trade is really significant in establishment of civilizations and culture, especially in archipelagic nation, including the Philippines. So we have been influenced by a lot of things. Even the cuisine that we have is also influenced by the trades that happened before. You know, it's really amazing that we could revisit this through all the materials found in archaeology, botanical specimens, and all. And we are very grateful for you providing us great insights, you know, for having us to learn the meanings of the colors in our flags and the link of these pigments and colors to our culture and to our ancestors. So are we okay for the questions now? I guess our speakers are all ready. All right. To invite interesting questions because we are represented by our cosmopolitan audiences, di ba? Ang dami. Please put on your questions in our Q&A or in our chat box. And please, for our audience, kindly specify onto whom you'd like to address the question so we could have it smoothly. Okay, I guess we have some. All right, so this is the first one. I guess it's supposed to be for Dr. Canilao. So the first question was from an anonymous attendee. How this happened that there are many merchants going to the Philippines just to introduce their products? What is really their purpose in going to the country, to the Philippines? And is it purely for commercial purposes, or shall we say that they have any other reason that they come to the Philippines? Sir?
Thank you, JD, and thank you for the question. From our limited research in Northwestern Luzon, we can argue that it's probably comparative advantage. So that concept in economics where you come to the trading table or venue to exchange products that are unique to you and to be able to buy something that you don't have. So in terms of comparative advantage, as mentioned in our presentation a while ago, and also mentioned by presentations of our colleagues early this morning, so shipwrecks, so you see a lot of ceramics, and from us, probably gold, forest products. So yeah, comparative advantage. Maybe my co-author, Malot, you want to add anything? She's the second author of the paper. Thank you.
Right, thank you, sir. All right, so let's have the next question. This is for Dr. Marian. It was given by Mr. Lambarto Pihatan Jr. So among the colors you had presented, which color really depicts the true nature of us Filipinos as a race and people in terms of our history and genealogy?
Yeah, that's actually quite a hard question to answer. But I mean, from our material evidence, from our cultural evidence that we have so far, as I have explained earlier, we have the pigment of red and also the black or blue plus yellow. And it's interesting to note that, for example, if we look at the bigger Southeast Asia, aside from black and red, yellow seems to be a color commonly found even in other parts of Southeast Asia, like Indonesia and also Malaysia. So maybe, we can say that we have those three colors that would probably, symbolize our ancestors. And maybe one of an explanation for that would be when it comes to our natural environment, we share it with other neighboring Southeast Asian nations as well. So that's why we have those. So as I have mentioned earlier, one of the ways that our probably ancestors classify things is, you're looking at the earth and then the sky. So maybe we could start from there, but of course we still have a lot of things to consider. Thank you.
All right, thank you. But yeah, I think it's the same curiosity as me, among all those colors. Maybe is asking which one is the color that best represent us, something like that. But thank you for the explanation, Ms. Ubalde. All right, let's have the next question. This is from me, Ian. This is from my question. Thanks for taking back through the significant findings and photos. I've actually been into one of the lecture of Dr. Mijares before about the some of the artifacts that they've discovered. So my question is that you've mentioned that there are grasses, the archaeobotanical side is also being considered. Did you also consider paleoecology? I mean, I'm not familiar with phytoliths, but I guess it's pertaining to the diatoms. Am I correct? So have you also considered paleoecology, wherein you can, have a paleo environmental reconstruction, what's in the past, and perhaps relate that to some of the findings that you have there?
Hello, yes. In terms of paleo environmental parang reconstructions, no, we started with paleobotanical remains, and because trying to extract the pollen wasn't successful, now we're moving on to phytoliths, which is being studied or being analyzed by our co-author Maricar. In terms of diatoms, our colleagues or my co-authors from the Geology and Paleontology Division, Abigail and Jaan, might be able to expound more on this, but they say that technically diatoms is present in both marine and freshwater sediments. But because our excavation site has a history of site formation involving volcanicalistic phenomena, so that might not there's a low chance or maybe to none that diatoms may be found. And there aren't any reports on the presence of diatomaceous earth or diatomite rocks in excavation sites, but it may be explored on other areas in the Cagayan Basin siguro.
All right. But also, yeah, they're actually more on aquatic environment, but there are also some perhaps in I think that's one of the things that we could explore more. There are also terrestrial diatoms and also some that are found on rocks too, which really could tell us a lot of things about the past, similar to what your significant findings are, the artifacts. So yeah,
so maybe that's also in the works. But thank you for that interesting question.
All right, thank you. Yep, let's have next question. This one is for Dr. Ubalde again. So, is there a resource list for Philippine pigment readings free for us to access? On another topic, what do you think would be a more suitable method of creating blue dye other than indigo production, as it's been proven to be harmful?
Actually, yeah, that's an interesting question. So, DOST is also doing some research right now, but I also from indigo plant, they use, instead of other chemical agents such as formaldehyde, they are using E. coli type of bacteria to use with indigo. So they say that it's more natural and it's not as harmful to the environment as using other chemical solutions. But of course, this is still on the works. And I think one of the problems with investigating about, mixing of these pigments also is that it's become a recipe, not only in the Philippines, but in other parts of the world. It's like a secret recipe used by different, textile and dye weavers. So we have to look into that as well.
All right. I think they're really interesting in how, the colors are really, how the colors originated, the meanings and all. So I think this is another follow-up question. How connected the colors of red and blue and their symbolisms with the existing artifacts in the pre-colonial era? Kasi sabi niya, we know po kasi na before, the Philippine flag is composed of red elements or black. So the connection perhaps between other symbolisms pre-colonial period.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because, well, we can only look at some material evidence from now, but when I think it's also important that we have to look at the linguistic sides of it. So aside from tracing the semantics, so like for example, in the Philippines, we have so many terms for red, right? In many languages around the Philippines, but when we talk about blue, so far we could only think of bughao, and of course the Spanish terms like lila or what else do we have for blue? So I think it would be really good if we have a linguist with the group as well, so we could also trace those and see, how it goes, how it plays out, and maybe also compare this with the terms used in other parts of Southeast Asia, because we all live in the same region. So I think that would be a really interesting study to pursue.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So for Dr. Michael Catilao, so sir, in your perspective, do you think it is possible to have a flourished economy through trade and exchanges without too much impinge on the cultural heritage of the Philippines during the pre-colonial to colonial period?
Thank you, JD. Well, you know, when you come to trade, it's materials, ideas, influences, and I believe cuisine was mentioned earlier. So that's fascinating, right? To have Chinese, Indian cuisine, Arabic also, so Persian at the time anyway. So I think it's something that's more, how should we put it? Latent. If you have some assimilation, it's a more it's a manifest kind of a forceful assimilation, but with ideas and all these influences, it's more manifest. And maybe my co-author has a comment also. Malot, would you like to comment on that? Thank you.
Right, Miss Malot, would like to add some things?
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, go on.
For me, kasi sometimes I have problems with my internet. It says my connection is unstable. Do you hear me?
Yeah, it's all right. We can hear you clearly.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so given the continuities, like in our presentation earlier, you could see that we have still the potteries, for example, the earthenware, the much older, of course, that's the much older type of pottery in the Philippines. It's really, you can call it indigenous, unlike the Bornay pottery of vegan, no? So, and we have the pottery and the weaving, and of course we have that history with the indigo, which way precedes the Spanish contact period. So, and we can see that we have, kumbaga, we still have a lot of potential when it comes to studies in this area, in the northwestern Luzon area. And we think that if we can only conduct further archaeological studies, especially in our pottery sites, we can really prove how vibrant the settlements and the trading were during the pre-Spanish contact period. So hindi lang ito it's not just like maritime trading that developed during the Spanish colonial period, but before it. And personally, I'm quite confident that if we can only pursue further archaeological studies around here, then we will be able to dig up a lot of information. That's all for now. Thank you.
Ay, nakamute pala ako. I've unmute. All right. So again, I think the answer, as what the authors mentioned, is that it's really quite impossible that you can bring the culture from one place to the other, because you're bringing ideas, you're bringing materials. So yes, so the Philippines that we have now is a product of all those trades and exchanges and culture exposure. So yes, thank you for your answers. This one is for Dr. Ubalde again. Are there any interesting accounts on the significance or relevance of red and blue colors to the rich tattooing tradition among ethno-linguistic groups? I ask this because we often see black as the common pigment used in tattoos as they relate to headhunting, childbirth, etc. So this is from Jimbo Fatalia.
Actually, that's interesting. In our paper so far, we haven't touched yet on tattooing, right? Because we just focus on the collections of the National Museum. But I think that would also be an interesting part of the paper on tattooing. But yeah, so far, as you mentioned, black seems to be the color used for tattooing. But yeah, we'll look into it. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you. All right, so okay. Do we have any more questions? I think this one is just out of curiosity. This is for Marian. Are there plans to exhibit the full skeleton of the rhino?
We are finding ways of syempre bringing the collections parang more to a more parang in a more accessible format to our clients. And while we already have the rhino exhibit at Ayala Reception Hall in NH, we are also trying to develop schemes on how we could mount the actual fossil materials because they are a bit fragile. So some even had to be reconstructed because they were found in several pieces. So we are working on that, and we'll let you know when we come up with a way of mounting or presenting it that way. Thank you.
Okay. They don't want bits and pieces, they want the
The whole thing.
All right. So thank you. Do we still have time? I guess for some of the questions that were left unanswered, we will just send this to our speakers and they will get back to you if you will just provide us with your email addresses to answer the questions. Thank you so much for an interesting discussion on this session, speakers. Dr. Canilao, thank you. Miss Marian Reyes and Miss Dr. Obalde, thank you so much. And I would like to return you on to our host, Miss Ian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, JD, for facilitating the plenary session. Thank you to our resource speakers who shared their invaluable knowledge and to all participants who joined and made this session interactive. We hope that you have learned a lot from our paper presenters and may their works inspire you to help expand the body of knowledge on pre-colonial Philippines through further research and studies. To cap the PIQC Session 9, let us hear from the convener of the National Museum of the Philippines session on Year of Filipino Pre-Colonial Ancestors, Dr. Ana Labrador.
So I have the privilege of actually giving you the concluding remarks for this seminar called Coming Full Circle in the Philippines, Climate Change, Environmental Shifts, and Evidence of Human Adaptation. So with the papers that you've just listened to, we actually are grateful for the lead speakers, Ancient Boats and the Contemporary Permutations in Mindanao by Bobby Aurelianeda, the Bandon Cloth Examining its Use, Manufacture, and Source, led by Maria Camille P. Calano and Marites Tauro, the Pre-Colonial North Luzon Trade and Exchange, led by Michael Armand Canilao, and the ancestors from 700,000 years ago, some evidence from Cagayan Kalinga sites, led by Marian Reyes. We also are quite pleased that were able to give you a preview of an exhibition that we hope to open this month. And this is Pula at Bughao, Shades of an Emerging Philippine Nation, whose lead paper reader is Marian Obalde. So the main thing is really that we were hoping that you could get the sense of what the Philippine ancestors may have practiced using their material culture. Our focus was actually on identity as the theme, which highlighted our awareness and pride of the heritage bestowed to us by our ancestors prior to the arrival of the Spaniards in 1521. So our theme actually is based on counteracting prejudiced perspectives and unfair portrayals of our ancestors as exotics and wild savages, using pre-Hispanic sources as well as the principal vestiges of ancestors' lifestyle and worldview, which we have inherited and embedded in our religious beliefs, our customs, folklore, expressions, languages, values, art forms, and other cultural outputs. So this theme encompasses the efforts, initiatives, and activities celebrating our intangible heritage, tourism, and dealings with historical and archival research, folkloric, anthropological, ethnographic documentation, and archaeological studies. So we hope that by having attended our one-day conference, that you not only appreciate what our Philippine pre-colonial ancestors may have been like, but also to really appreciate the cultural diversity and our material culture. So thank you very much, and I hope that we can see each other again through exploring the ideas and possible trajectories in terms of further research. Mabuhay kayong lahat.
Thank you very much. Inspiring message. After attentively listening to the speakers, we learned more about our identity as Filipinos. With the help of the studies on the material culture of our early ancestors, we can expand our understanding of their lifeways. To view the material culture of pre-colonial Philippines, you can visit for free our flagship museums, the National Museum of Fine Arts, the National Museum of Anthropology, and the National Museum of Natural History. You can also visit our regional, area, and site museums located all over the Philippines. Our museums are open Tuesdays to Sundays from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Entrance is free. Check our social media channels for details and health protocol guidelines. You can also visit our website, www.nationalmuseum.gov.ph, for virtual tours and online exhibitions. We would like to thank all the speakers, organizers, partner interpreters, and to all participants who shared their time in making this conference successful. Join us tomorrow for session 10 of the PIQC convened by the University of the Philippines, Baguio, with the session theme, Beliefs, Systems, and Spiritual Climate in the Philippines over the last 500 years. And catch Panel C, Session 9 on December 15, 2021, convened by the National Historical Commissions of the Philippines. For our Zoom attendees, attendance is automatically recorded by Zoom upon entry. Evaluation forms will be sent to your registered email addresses within 24 hours from the end of today's session. Maraming salamat po sa inyong partisipasyon. This is your host, Mars, now signing off.